October 24th, 1974. Kinshasa, Zaire. The Intercontinental Hotel buzzed with the electricity of international media and the anticipation of what would become the most famous boxing match in history. The Rumble in the Jungle was just 6 days away, and Muhammad Ali had just finished verbally dismantling George Foreman at a press conference in front of journalists from over 30 countries. Standing against the back wall of that conference room, wearing a black suit and sunglasses, was Big Mike Thompson, all 350 pounds of him. A former NFL linebacker for the Detroit Lions, Big Mike had been George Foreman's personal bodyguard for 2 years. He took his job seriously, perhaps too seriously, and every word that came out of Muhammad Ali's mouth felt like a personal attack on the man he was paid to protect. What happened in the narrow hallway behind that conference room would last only 3 seconds, but it would plant a seed of doubt in George Foreman's mind that would grow into his first professional defeat. Because sometimes the most devastating punches aren't thrown in the ring, they're thrown in moments when nobody expects them, witnessed by the people who matter most. If stories about the psychological warfare that determines champions move you, subscribe for more incredible moments that prove the battle is often won before the first bell rings. George Foreman entered the press conference that afternoon as the most feared heavyweight champion in boxing history. At 25 years old, he was 40-0 with 37 knockouts, a wrecking machine who had demolished every opponent placed in front of him. He had destroyed Joe Frazier in 2 rounds, the same Joe Frazier who had given Muhammad Ali fits in their trilogy. He had obliterated Ken Norton in 2 rounds, the same Ken Norton who had broken Ali's jaw and given him 2 of the toughest fights of his career. The betting odds had Foreman as a 4-1 favorite, and most boxing experts predicted he would knock Ali out early. The only question seemed to be which round Ali would fall, but Muhammad Ali had a different plan. At 32 years old, past his athletic prime according to most observers, Ali understood that he couldn't beat George Foreman with pure physical ability, so he was going to beat him with something far more powerful, psychological warfare. From the moment they had both arrived in Zaire, Ali had been working on Foreman's mind with surgical precision. At every press conference, every public appearance, every opportunity he could create, Ali attacked Foreman's confidence, his skills, his reputation, and more importantly, his self-image. George Foreman is a mummy, Ali announced to the packed room of international journalists that afternoon. He's slow, he's stiff, he punches like he's underwater. I've seen him train, and when he hits the heavy bag, it don't even move. You know why? Because even the bag knows he can't hurt it. The reporters laughed and scribbled furiously. This was exactly the kind of content they had flown to Africa to capture. Capture! George Foreman ain't no champion, Ali continued, his voice rising with theatrical passion. He's a robot, and I'm gonna show the whole world how to unplug him. He's the biggest fraud in boxing history. He ain't fought nobody real. He beat up old men past their prime, and now he thinks he's tough. But in 6 days, I'm going to dance around him, tire him out, and knock him flat. The whole world is going to watch George Foreman fall. The room erupted in laughter and applause. Flashbulbs popped like small explosions. Reporters pushed forward to get better angles. This was entertainment at its finest, and Muhammad Ali was the master showman. George Foreman sat at his table just 20 feet away, his jaw clenched, his massive hands folded in front of him, saying nothing. His trainer, Dick Sadler, whispered to him to stay calm, to not take the bait, to let his fist do the talking in the ring where it mattered. But across the room, standing against the back wall in his black suit and dark sunglasses, Big Mike Thompson was seething. Big Mike Thompson was 29 years old, 6'4", and 350 pounds of muscle and attitude. He had played defensive line for the Detroit Lions for 3 seasons before a knee injury ended his NFL career and sent him drifting into security work. And when Foreman's management team hired him 2 years earlier, Big Mike embraced the role with the intensity of a man who finally had something important to protect. But Big Mike's job had evolved beyond simple physical protection. He had developed a deep personal loyalty to George Foreman, and he took every slight against his employer as a personal insult. In Big Mike's mind, disrespecting George Foreman was the same as disrespecting him. And Muhammad Ali had been disrespecting George Foreman every single day for weeks. Every press conference was torture for Big Mike. Every interview was an exercise in restraint. Every time Ali opened his mouth, Big Mike felt his blood pressure rise and his fists clench. He wanted to shut Ali up, to teach him respect, to show him what happened when you cross the wrong people. George Foreman had warned him multiple times, "Don't touch Ali, don't engage with him." But as Big Mike watched Ali perform for the cameras that afternoon, mocking the man he was hired to protect, something inside him began to snap. When the press conference ended, Muhammad Ali headed backstage through a narrow hallway toward his dressing room, surrounded by his entourage, Angelo Dundee, his trainer, Bundini Brown, his assistant, Dr. Freddie Pacheco, his physician, and several aides and supporters. They were laughing about the press conference, riding the high of Ali's performance, celebrating another successful psychological assault. Ali was still talking, still performing, still in character. Did you see George's face? Man looked like he wanted to cry. Big George Foreman, scared of Muhammad Ali. 6 more days and the whole world's gonna see what I've been telling them. This man ain't nothing special. The group laughed and continued down the hallway. It was all part of the show, all part of the mental game that Ali had perfected over 2 decades of professional boxing. Big Mike had been standing near the back exit of the conference room, and when he saw Ali and his entourage pass by, celebrating and laughing at George Foreman's expense, something in him finally broke. All the weeks of insults, all the daily disrespect, all the mockery in front of the world's media, it boiled over in one moment of catastrophically poor judgment. Aye! Big Mike's voice boomed down the hallway like thunder. Ali turned, still smiling from the press conference high. "What's up, big man?" Big Mike walked toward him with purpose, and Ali's entourage instinctively moved aside. Nobody wanted to get between a 350-pound angry man and his target, especially not in a narrow hotel hallway where there was nowhere to look. Big Mike closed the distance until he was standing directly in front of Ali, using his massive frame to intimidate. The size difference was striking. Big Mike had 4 inches of height and 140 pounds on the boxing champion. "You need to shut your mouth about Mr. Foreman," Big Mike said, his voice low and menacing. "You disrespect him one more time, and you're going to have a problem with me." Ali looked up at Big Mike, and he was looking up, because Big Mike towered over him and flashed that famous smile that had charmed and infuriated opponents for 20 years. "You're Foreman's bodyguard, right? Well, tell Foreman if he needs his bodyguard to fight his battles for him. Maybe you shouldn't be stepping in the ring with me." Big Mike's face went red with anger. "You think this is funny? I think you should get out of my face before you do something you regret," Ali replied, his voice still calm, but carrying an edge of warning that Big Mike was too angry to recognize. That's when Big Mike made the biggest mistake of his life. He shoved Ali hard with both hands, using his massive strength to slam the boxing champion back against the concrete wall of the hallway. Ali's head hit the wall with an audible thud that echoed down the corridor. His entourage gasped. Bundini Brown started to step forward, but Ali raised a hand to stop him. "You touch me again," Ali said, his voice suddenly cold, all humor and playfulness gone, "and I'm going to put you on the floor." Big Mike actually laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that filled the narrow hallway. "You're gonna put me on the floor? Old man, I got 140 pounds on you. You got 140 pounds of nothing," Ali said quietly. "Size don't mean skill." Big Mike shoved Ali again, harder this time, pressing him against the wall with both hands. "What are you gonna do about it, champ?" What Big Mike didn't see was George Foreman, who had followed his bodyguard down the hallway and was now standing in a doorway about 15 feet away. Foreman had heard the commotion and come to investigate. Now he was watching, knowing exactly what was about to unfold, knowing he should probably stop it, but curious to see if Big Mike would finally learn the lesson that Foreman had tried to teach him with words. Ali looked at Big Mike's hands pressing against his chest, then looked up into the big man's eyes. "You really want to do this? I want you to learn some respect!" Big Mike snarled. "All right," Ali said quietly. "Don't say I didn't warn you." Big Mike pulled back his massive right fist, scarred from years of football and street fights. He was going to hit Ali, not to push him around, but actually strike him, teach this loudmouth a lesson he would never forget. Punch came forward in a wide haymaker, carrying 350 pounds of muscle and bone behind it, aimed directly at Ali's head. In Big Mike's mind, this was going to be the easiest fight of his life. Ali was old, smaller, and trapped against a wall with nowhere to go. It was over before it started, except Ali wasn't there when the punch arrived. Ali slipped the incoming punch by moving his head just 2 inches to the left, a minimal movement that made Big Mike's fist crash into the concrete wall where Ali's head had been a fraction of a second earlier. Big Mike felt his knuckles explode with pain as bones cracked against the unforgiving concrete. And while Big Mike was processing that unexpected agony, Muhammad Ali moved 3 punches. Left jab to the solar plexus, the nerve center just below the ribcage where all the body's electrical systems converge. Right hook to the exact same spot, doubling the neurological impact. Left uppercut to the body as Big Mike started to buckle forward from the pain. The entire combination took maybe 2 seconds, possibly less. And each punch landed with devastating precision and power that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than muscle and bone. Ali wasn't trying to knock Big Mike out. He was trying to make sure Big Mike couldn't breathe, couldn't fight back, couldn't do anything except collapse. The solar plexus shots were designed to short-circuit Big Mike's nervous system, to shut down his diaphragm and leave him gasping like a fish out of water. Big Mike dropped to his knees immediately, then fell forward onto his hands, his mouth open in a perfect circle as he desperately tried to remember how to breathe. His diaphragm was in complete spasm. He couldn't get air in, couldn't get air out, couldn't speak, couldn't move. All 350 pounds of NFL muscle and street fighting experience had been reduced to a wheezing, helpless mass on the hallway floor. Ali stood over him, not celebrating, not gloating, just watching with the cold professionalism of a man who had done exactly what needed to be done. "I told you," Ali said quietly. "You don't listen." That's when Ali looked up and saw George Foreman standing in the doorway, 15 feet away, watching the entire scene unfold. Their eyes met across the hallway, and in that moment, something passed between them, an understanding, a recognition, a truth that couldn't be denied or explained away. George Foreman had just watched his 350-pound bodyguard, a former NFL player trained to hurt people, get completely destroyed by Muhammad Ali in less time than it took most people to process what was happening. Foreman walked slowly over to where Big Mike was still struggling to breathe, looked down at his employee with a mixture of disappointment and resignation. "I told you not to touch him, Mike," Foreman said, his voice carrying no anger, just the weariness of a man who had seen something he wished he hadn't. "I told you multiple times." Big Mike managed to gasp out something that might have been sorry, but he was still too focused on getting oxygen back into his lungs to form coherent words. Foreman looked at Ali, who was straightening his shirt and checking for any damage from being slammed against the wall. "He shouldn't have touched you," Foreman said. It was both an apology and a statement of respect, one professional acknowledging what another professional had been forced to do. "No," Ali agreed simply. "He shouldn't have." "You all right?" Foreman asked, and it was a genuine question. Despite their upcoming fight, despite the rivalry, despite everything that had been said in press conferences and interviews, there was a code between regal fighters. Big Mike wasn't a fighter. He was just a bodyguard who had gotten stupid and paid the price. "I'm fine," Ali said. Then, quieter, "You still want to fight me in 6 days?" Foreman looked down at his bodyguard, 350 pounds of former NFL muscle, trained in violence and intimidation, still struggling to remember how to breathe on a hotel hallway floor. Then he looked at Muhammad Ali, who wasn't even breathing hard, who had destroyed Big Mike in less time than it took to snap your fingers. "Yeah," Foreman said, but for the first time since they had signed the contract to fight, he didn't sound completely certain. Ali nodded and started to walk away with his entourage, who had watched the entire encounter in stunned silence. Then he turned back. "George, I meant what I said in there at the press conference. You're a great puncher, maybe the hardest puncher I'll ever face. When we get in that ring in 6 days, you're gonna learn something important. Power ain't enough. Speed beats power every time. Skill beats strength, and heart beats everything." Then Muhammad Ali walked away, leaving George Foreman standing over his bodyguard in that narrow hallway, processing what he had just witnessed. Word of the incident spread through both training camps within hours, despite attempts by Foreman's team to keep it quiet. The psychological damage was immediate and irreversible. It had nothing to do with Ali's trash talk or his verbal gymnastics, and everything to do with what George Foreman had witnessed with his own eyes. The next 6 days leading up to the fight, Foreman couldn't get the image out of his head. Big Mike on the ground, gasping for air, while Ali stood over him looking completely calm and in control. 3 seconds, that's all it had taken for Muhammad Ali to destroy 350 pounds of trained muscle and attitude. When fight night finally arrived on October 30th, 1974, George Foreman climbed into the ring at the Stade du 20 Mai in Kinshasa as the heavy favorite. He was still the undefeated heavyweight champion. He still had the most feared punch in boxing. He still had every physical advantage that had made him dominant. But somewhere in the back of his mind, as he walked to his corner and prepared for the biggest fight of his career, George Foreman was still thinking about that hallway. Still seeing Big Mike's confidence before the confrontation, and Big Mike gasping for air afterward, still wondering if size and power would really be enough against a man who could do what he had witnessed 6 days earlier. As the fight progressed, and Ali weathered Foreman's early assault, and Ali absorbed punch after punch while continuing to talk and move and fight back, Foreman found himself remembering that moment when Big Mike thought his 350 pounds guaranteed victory, right up until the moment he realized he was wrong. By the 7th round, when Ali began his legendary rope-a-dope strategy, letting Foreman punch himself into exhaustion while conserving his own energy, the doubt that had been planted in that hotel hallway began to bloom into full uncertainty. And in the 8th round, when Muhammad Ali knocked George Foreman out with a perfectly timed right hand that sent the champion crashing to the canvas for the first time in his professional career, Foreman understood that the fight hadn't really been won in the ring. It had been won 6 days earlier in a narrow hallway in the Intercontinental Hotel when George Foreman watched Muhammad Ali destroy his bodyguard in 3 seconds and planted the seed of doubt that would grow into his first professional defeat. Years later, in his autobiography, George Foreman would write about that moment with brutal honesty. Watching Mike go down like that, seeing him helpless on the floor, I knew, not consciously maybe, but somewhere deep inside, I knew Ali was different. I knew that size and power weren't going to be enough. And I knew that for all my strength and all my knockouts, I was facing someone who had been in more fights, more confrontations, more pressure situations than I could imagine. Mike thought 350 pounds meant he would win automatically. I thought 40-0 with 37 knockouts meant I would win automatically. We were both wrong, and we were wrong for the same reason. We were both fighting Muhammad Ali. And Muhammad Ali didn't lose to people who thought they were supposed to win. He beat them mentally before the first bell ever rang. Big Mike Thompson never worked as a bodyguard again after that night in Kinshasa. The story of how Muhammad Ali had put him on the floor in 3 seconds made him a liability in the personal protection business. Who would hire a bodyguard who had been so easily handled by a man 140 pounds lighter than him? He returned to Detroit and lived the rest of his life as the answer to a boxing trivia question: who was the 350-pound bodyguard that Muhammad Ali destroyed backstage before the Rumble in the Jungle? But for George Foreman, that hallway confrontation was the beginning of the end of his undefeated streak, the moment when he learned that psychological warfare could be just as important as physical preparation, and the night he discovered that sometimes the most devastating punches are the ones that land on your confidence instead of your face. The Rumble in the Jungle is remembered as one of the greatest upsets in sports history, the night when Muhammad Ali proved that intelligence and experience could triumph over youth and power. But the real battle began 6 days earlier, in a hotel hallway, when Ali demonstrated to the one person who mattered most that he was still the most dangerous man in boxing, not because of his size or his strength, but because of his ability to win fights before they ever officially began. Because that's what separated Muhammad Ali from every other fighter of his generation. He understood that boxing wasn't just about what happened between the ropes, it was about everything that happened before you ever stepped foot in the ring. The press conferences, the interviews, the psychological warfare, the moments when nobody was watching except the people who needed to see. And on October 24th, 1974, in a narrow hallway in Kinshasa, Zaire, Muhammad Ali made sure that George Foreman saw exactly what he was up against. Not just a fighter, but a complete warrior who could win battles with his fists, his words, his mind, and when necessary, all three at once. The bodyguard who thought 350 pounds made him invincible learned it otherwise in 3 seconds. And the heavyweight champion who watched it happen learned that sometimes the most important fights are the ones that nobody sells tickets to see.